Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. I'm Sal. This is my co-host Monty. How's it going, man?
It's going good, man. I mean, I felt like less disappointing week of Giants football despite the loss than normal. So I feel all right this week. How about
So,
you?
so you look the slowly lowering your standards as a fan makes it easier to go by week. No, I felt the same way. But before we get into the Giant stuff and episode 8, which is going to be a tight end review, I wanted to thank everybody who has been listening and tuning in. We hit our 100 subscriber mark on YouTube, so we really appreciate you guys for that. So thank you guys. We're going to keep going with this. And just as a reminder, it's you can add us. I'm Sal at Queens_guy on Twitter. Monty is at Monte Cristo at MONTECRI5TO, or you can add us at He's a Giant Pod. You can follow us on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify. If you like what you see, please leave us 5 stars, like, subscribe. You know the whole bit by now. But getting past that business, let's talk about what just happened this week. That we didn't get a chance to record an after game pod, a reaction pod after the 14-9 loss against Buffalo on Sunday Night Football. But it's been a few days. You've had a little chance to digest it. What are your thoughts on that game?
No, I'm proud. I'm proud of the team. I'm proud of how the guys fought. I thought the defense played their ass off. I mean, Bobby Okereke is really showing to be everything we wanted him to be when we signed him, and a lot more. It sucks losing the game, and I know a lot of people don't want to hear the moral victory bullshit, but I mean, after the beginning of the season, I'll take a fucking moral victory because what we were kind of talking about was it's not the fact that we started with the record that we started with, because everyone to an extent was like, look, this is a record that you guys could have seen coming, but it was how we were losing it. So again, it's how you lose, and against one of the best teams in the NFL coming down to the very last second, honestly, I'm not going to sit here and blame the refs, but you could. It was a well-fought game. How about you?
Yeah, it was the first 4 full quarters of football we saw them be competitive in, which is kind of ridiculous to say. It took 6 games to see that, but it took 6 games to see 4 good quarters of football from this football team. And yeah, I know they only scored 9 points, and it's not like we're doing victory laps on that, but they got 5 scoring drives where they were inside scoring territory, 3 that resulted in field goals, and 2 that ended each half at the 1-yard line. I know a lot of people made a big deal of the mishap at the end of the first half, and there's no excuse for that. It's a mess up. I'm not really sure exactly what happened there, but Tyrod's a veteran. He probably should handle that a little bit better. But at the end of the game, he drove the team right down to the 1-yard line, like you said. Made some big plays down the stretch, big 4th-down conversion to Jalen Hyatt, who came up big over and over again in this game. And then, like you said, I mean, I don't think they would have called pass interference twice in a row, but they could have because Waller got mauled on that play. So they played really good football, man. And against a really good team. The 2 big takeaways, the easy one, the less controversial one, the defense played out of their mind. I mean, they were so good, man. And Bobby Okereke, who I've given shit to, and I think rightfully so, because he was underperforming when he first got here. And I've been questioning whether or not he's truly like a number 1 type Mike linebacker, or somebody who's Pro Bowl caliber, as a lot of fans thought he was. Well, he played like a Pro Bowler the other night. He was out of his mind, like hitting his run gaps, exploding into them, knocking guys backwards. He was a tackling machine, making plays all over the place. The tip pass that led to the interception, had interception. He was all over the place, So
he's so good in coverage, man.
He showed everything that you like about his upside: the athleticism, the speed, the power. Like he was
The
really
long arms, man, with those reach. It's crazy.
It was almost like his scouting report coming out of Stanford. It all developed in one game. Like it came together of what he could be. And if that's a glimpse of what he's going to be for the Giants, then we have ourselves a damn good linebacker for a few years. So I was really excited. He made McFadden look better. And McFadden, to his credit, has played better. But I think playing next to Okereke really, really helped him a lot.
100%. Instead of sitting here and saying, we need a linebacker to help Okereke be good. Okereke is helping Micah McFadden be good, which is
Absolutely. It was a huge
really
deal.
a nice thing.
Deontay Banks, man, what can you say about this kid? Week after week, he's looking locked down at this point. Like he's really
Yeah.
taken on the top assignment. He's taken away the best receivers on the other team and minimizing their impact, which is incredible as a rookie.
Yeah, I know there's some talk
Yeah.
to like, it was a couple missed throws, a drop by Stephon Diggs, but you know what? When you're sticky like he is, and he was right there in every single one of those plays, that makes it so you got to make that throw perfect. It's so
Yeah.
you have to worry about someone being there to knock the ball away. So like I'm not gonna like overreact to that part, but like it's not just a one game thing. Like we've talked about, he's steadily been a good player for a rookie
He
corner.
he's quickly becoming the guy that other teams know like are beginning to realize like let's not throw to that guy's side, which
Mhm.
is pretty phenomenal for a rookie. So, of the rookie corners drafted, he's clearly like right now, he might be the best. I mean, you can make an argument for Devin Witherspoon.
Mhm.
Certainly, he's playing out of his mind, and Christian Gonzalez is playing great before he got hurt.
Yeah, him before he got hurt probably be the answer, but he's hurt now.
Yeah,
So
right. But right now, I mean, it really is those three kind of neck and neck and playing really out of their minds. So good for those guys, and I was really thrilled about that. I thought our defense played great, up and down. They held Josh Allen, and short of Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things
oh
with
my
that
god, that throw.
insane throw to get the touchdown. I mean, they had them shut out for essentially 3 quarters. So it's insane how well the defense played against that offense. So Wink had his guys ready to play.
Yep.
Wink really brought it. So they heard
As
the
he
criticism.
has.
Yeah, they've been playing really
As we've
well,
been
man.
saying.
Yeah, I mean, they played terrible in the first game. They didn't play well in the second game, and ever
The,
since then, they've
the
really been
first
good.
half of the second game.
Correct. They weren't awful. I mean, they weren't good in the San Francisco game.
Just couldn't
Uh,
tackle,
they
but
just
they
couldn't
got
tackle.
so many third downs.
They were in third and long over and over and over again in that game. They just couldn't finish, and it was
Mhm.
frustrating. And then they've really slowly and steadily been getting better and better and better as a unit. And they look like they're ready to play every week. They give me hope for better football,
Yep.
which brings us to the offense. This is where it gets interesting. They only scored 9 points, but like I said, 5 drives where they could have scored points, 3 where they got field goals, 2 the end of the half at the 1 yard line without points. For the first time outside of those 2 quarters in Arizona, for the first time this year, this looks like a functional NFL offense.
Yes.
And
That's
that's
the
what,
best way to put it.
yeah. I mean, nothing great. Tyrod is not like a superstar. He's a good, solid backup quarterback who can come in and run an offense, and he made it look functional. And he had Justin Pugh playing left tackle for him, who was awful. Let me say that again. For the people who want to make this a referendum on like how Justin Pugh somehow saved the offensive line, he was horrendous at left tackle. Like, and I don't blame him. He came off of his couch basically, signed off the street, playing guard, and then immediately has to shoot over to left tackle for the first time in his career since I think like his rookie year or something. I don't know when the last time he played left tackle was. Um, and
I think
you know,
he played a little bit like snaps at a time throughout his career, but basically he hasn't like he essentially started a game, which he hasn't done since college.
right, and he was getting smoked at left tackle, and he got a little bit better as the game went on, but
He
for the
definitely got
most part,
better, but
but like you
the
said,
bar is
yeah,
the floor at left tackle right now.
right, and the line was basically the same, injured, broken, not very good, and people were coming out of the game saying, "Oh, well, the line was finally good," and I remember talking to you that night saying this line wasn't good. Let's just see what the PFF grades comes out as, and what were the PFF grades?
If
50.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at where they kind of stack up throughout the year, like look, don't get me wrong, versus Miami, that was the worstest offensive lines played all year. That offensive line was terrible against Miami. But very similar to how they played versus Seattle, which they
Yeah,
gave up 11 sacks. But guess what? Only 4 of those were on the offensive line. So what did we give up this game? 3.
yeah,
Very similar numbers. Arizona, they legitimately played good versus Arizona. PFF
yeah.
numbers were good, and when we get a half of good play in that game, Cowboys they struggled a little bit, but like no, this was not like some breakthrough. Amazing. It was very similar to Seattle.
That's right. It's still a bad line. I mean, at the end of this is still a bad offensive line, but somehow they look functional and they looked okay. Like they didn't look like they were destroying the game. and there's a
No.
reason for that. Saquon Barkley was back. That definitely helped, no doubt about it. But it didn't help for 3 quarters. He was
Yeah.
terrible through
He
3 quarters.
was.
I think he had 13 carries for 32 yards or something like that through the first 3 quarters. Something
I mean,
awful.
I would even say 4 quarters in some sense. Yes, he had those 2 big runs, but there's a
Those are the
reason
same
why
one.
they were afraid to run the ball at the end of the game there is because they didn't trust Saquon Barkley at the level he was playing at. If he was
Yeah.
fully healthy Saquon Barkley, they probably try to finish the game running on 4th and 1, but they got stuffed, so they didn't want to do it again.
I mean, his final numbers look better, but he did what Saquon Barkley sometimes does, where he gets a whole lot of nothing the whole game. He's getting like 1 or 2 yards a carry, and then he breaks off a couple of monster runs and he hits home runs. And that's
Mhm.
what home run hitting running backs do sometimes.
Yeah.
It's feast or famine. The overall numbers look like a solid back, but that's not like a steady 4 or 5 yards per carry at all. And he did not have an impact in a positive way for most of the game, except for one drive, basically. So
Mhm.
what made the offense look functional? It was honestly Tyrod Taylor. And a lot of Daniel Jones fans don't like hearing this, but it is a reality. He came in with the same team and he basically made it look functional. And the way he did that was he just read defenses better and he took shots down the field. He took hole shots. He threatened the third level. He got Jalen Hyatt involved. He got Wandell Robinson involved. And the defense of the Bills, which is if not the best, one of the best defenses in the
They
NFL.
were number 2 scoring defense going into that game.
And they were playing zone against us. They weren't coming downhill all game. They had to respect our deep game because Tyrod showed them, I'll take a shot on you. I'll throw the
Mhm.
ball deep to Hyatt. I'll throw the ball deep to Slayton. I'm going to take a shot if you give me a chance to. And they had to respect that, which is something that defenses have not done against the Giants in I don't know how long. The last defense that played like that against us was really Ed Donatel's defense for no reason whatsoever. And they were awful. So,
Yeah.
I mean, really, other than Ed Donatel's Minnesota defense, like nobody has played the Giants like that in a long time. That was the difference. This is what we were looking for coming into the season. That threaten, we were saying this before the season. Daniel Jones, threaten these defenses deep, threaten them deep, make them respect you, threaten the field side, make them respect you, and it just hasn't happened. So the difference in this game, even though it wasn't great, but the difference was clearly Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah. And look, like this isn't some like consistent, like functional offense that we ran in this game. It was a lot of short passes. But the thing is, and it's because our offensive line isn't very good and they have to do a lot of that. But what we've been asking for, and I mean, obviously we wanted more than this going to the season, but we talked about we just wanted a few so it's like 2 to 3 explosive plays every single game out of our quarterback, and, you know, that's what Tyrod gave us.
Yeah.
Tyrod gave us 2 accounted for 20+ yard, receptions and a bullshit illegal man downfield that should have gave him another 45 yards to Jalen Hyatt, and there's no chance in hell Daniel Jones is throwing that pass that he threw to Jalen Hyatt.
No,
He is
because
not throwing that.
and that's one of those throws. A few of those throws, including the one, by the way, that Darius Slayton dropped on the second to last drive on fourth down, where he throws it down the sideline into double coverage and it hits Slayton in the chest, and Slayton
Mhm.
drops it. And people were crapping on Tyrod, saying, "Look at Wandell Robinson; he was open in the flat." Well, he was open, and maybe he definitely took the riskier throw, but he threw the ball perfectly. He hit Slayton in the
I
chest on that
I
play.
thought that was the Hyatt one where Hyatt was like where he tried to draw the pass interference against
Was that
with
the
Hyatt.
Hyatt play?
I think
But
so.
I'm remembering the play in the second to last drive. It might have been the third or fourth down play where he hit Slayton down the
Yeah, I
sideline.
think the Wandale one though was on the Hyatt.
Okay, well, the Slayton one also was a lost explosive play where Slayton just dropped the ball, which Slayton does sometimes, right? He'll just drop the ball, like hit him in the chest,
Yeah.
catch the ball, put your hands out, catch it. But like he took chances, and again, nobody is sitting here and arguing that Tyrod Taylor is something phenomenal. He's Tyrod Taylor.
He's
Like
not a
he's just a
top 32 quarterback in the NFL.
right. He's just a really good veteran backup quarterback. He's a respected veteran, solid backup, and he was doing things that we were begging our $160 million quarterback to do, which he still hasn't done. And if you brought those plays up to like for example the Hyatt throw that you said Daniel Jones doesn't make, if that exact same play happens and Jones takes a short route or maybe does it or throws that ball away, and you run it back and you show people, hey, look, Hyatt had some room there. What the truthers would say is, find me the throw. Where's the throw he missed? Nobody was open. That's NFL Open.
Yeah.
That's what NFL Open looks like, and that they'll argue till they'll argue forever, and we'll say that NFL quarterbacks make that throw, and you've been arguing with them on Twitter, and others have. And to honor your valiant battle against like the most insane fan base, I wore this shirt for you, Monty. And for all of you battling the truthers, gaslighting is not real. You're just crazy, because that is what they're doing to you. They're gaslighting you to tell you, no, 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 we would have won the game if Daniel Jones was playing. No, we wouldn't have, because we wouldn't have even gotten those plays completed. Let's be real.
Daniel Jones would have stepped up won a primetime game. Is that what they're trying to tell me?
He would have thrown the exactly. No, we would. You know what? I'm going to be honest with you guys, and we're probably going to lose some of our subscribers now. But sorry, but if Daniel Jones played in that game, we probably lose that game 30-6 or something along those lines. And the reason I'm saying that is because the defense of the Bills would have played us very differently if Daniel Jones just played the way Daniel Jones has been playing all season, which is basically missing deep reads, basically getting rattled by pass rush, and throwing the ball away or throwing it short. And teams just know they're not going to have to worry about the deep pass. They're not going to have to worry about the vertical threat, and they just come downhill all game long on him. And that would have resulted in the offense getting off the field quickly.
Yep.
None of these long drives. The defense would have gotten gassed like they've been gassed in other games. And instead of giving up 14 points, they would have given up 28, 30 points, because they would have been gassed and they would have been long drives. That is the reality of what would have happened against us if Daniel Jones was quarterbacking that game. So anybody who's telling you, oh, we would have won that game, completely full of shit. They're gaslighting you. That's not what would have happened. Not the way he's playing this year. Not the way he's playing this year.
And look, I'm not here to say that like Tyrod Taylor is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones, but at this point, Daniel Jones' confidence has been totally zapped. He is playing scared. His internal clock is totally off, and he's afraid to take shots downfield. And that I said it, last week was I think that Tyrod gives us a better chance because I don't think his confidence is zapped like him. It's nothing to do with where I see them from a talent standpoint, and everything to do with a confidence aspect. And it's just not there for Daniel Jones right now. And I think I totally agree with you. I wanted to bring up the same point was, people talk about the final yardage, and people talk about, which granted we had over 300 yards of total offense for the record, but
we had more yards than the Bills.
Yep. People talk about the final points we put up, but at the end of the day, it wasn't an illusion why you felt this offense looked better despite seeing those stats. Like, oh, maybe it wasn't. No, it's because we were consistently driving into Buffalo territory. On 6 occasions, we drove into Buffalo territory. On 5 occasions, we drove into the red zone. On 2 occasions, we drove to the 1-yard line. And because of that, it helped our defense. It gave us opportunities to score. And yes, like we brought up, like, look, there's a lot of reasons you can be mad about us not scoring from the 1-yard line, but it's not necessarily our red zone efficiency. Like the clock ran out on us. Bad clock management. You could easily say you could blame Tyrod for, audibling to a run. That was a mistake, and you can kill him for that if you want to. But I think under a normal game script, I mean, the probability tells you we score both times.
Yeah. It just didn't work out. It didn't work out, but they were there. And the point is we're not ever there when, in other games. We're just not. We're not getting those scoring drives. And, it's the reality of what happened. Now we'll see. I mean, it could have just been one game where Tyrod had his revenge game against the Bills, and that's all it was.
And look, and maybe it is. Yeah, and maybe it is. And like we said, we're not sitting here saying like Tyrod should be starting and he's the answer or anything like that. We're not saying any of that. And if Tyrod just comes back and is nothing from here on out, that doesn't change anything about what I'm saying. What we've been trying to tell you guys is that there is a sustainable offense that could happen with even decent quarterback play underneath this offense. And Tyrod Taylor showed that. I don't know if Tyrod Taylor can consistently give us decent quarterback play, but he gave us decent quarterback play during that game. And you saw what the offense could look like. We'll see
Yeah.
if either Daniel Jones or Tyrod Taylor can give us that for the rest of the season. But I was against a top defense. So like that was not the Miami Dolphins, that bottom 5 defense in the NFL. That was a top 2 defense in the
Or the Seattle Seahawks, the bottom
NFL.
5 defense, that made
Yep.
us look like they were the 85 Bears. It was just it was disheartening and encouraging at the same time to watch. Encouraging that the offense is capable of at least looking functional, and disheartening that it took a career journeyman backup to come in and play that way to show that to us. And the discussion is not who's better, Tyrod or Daniel Jones. That's not the issue. The issue is that we're having the discussion at all
Yep.
because you've just paid $160 million to a 26-year-old quarterback, supposedly because he's ascending. You took an outlier strategy on him, despite his resume not really being worthy of anything remotely close to that, rather than franchise tagging him or just letting him go. And he, thus far, looks like he got outplayed, at least for that one game, in terms of running the offense by a career journeyman 34-year-old backup quarterback. The fact that that's even a discussion is a very troubling indictment on Joe Shane's decision making with Daniel Jones. Unfortunately, that's just the way it's playing out.
And that's the issue that we talked about going into this year. I think me and you both took a positive approach at once it was done. And we were like, hey,
Hope for the best.
if we
Yeah.
believe in this guy, you make this step, and this step, get these stats, and these stats. We both felt this is a reasonable ask like of him. If he's gonna make a step, we had reasonable milestones for him to hit and reasonable things for him to do. And a lot of people were ready to say, like, hey, Daniel Jones is better than Geno Smith. Daniel Jones is better than Jared Goff. And we were both kind of like, hey, like, I'm not saying he can't do that, but like those guys did it already.
Yeah,
Like,
can we see it happen? Yeah.
let's see it happen. I'm not disagreeing with you guys that, if you're paying somebody like this, like those numbers they put up aren't crazy things to ask from your quarterback to do. And, let's see what we can do. But it can't be just more of the same. And in this case, worse than what we saw. And that's what we're at. And it's troubling. It's a
Yeah.
problem.
I mean, his health issues aside, which I guess,
Yeah.
that's
Another
going
thing we
that's
got
going
into
to,
that, but
yeah. I mean, that's going to kind of, at this point, it's going to probably sort itself out. He still isn't having practices with any contact, which makes you think that he's still not ready to play. And, if he misses 2 straight games, who knows where this lands? I mean, it's eerily similar to 2021. That's all I have to say about that.
I think at this point, the way I'm approaching it is he's out for the season until he's not. That's just where my head's at.
I mean, I think that's probably a fair way to look at it because that's how things played out in 2021, despite what Dave is saying right now.
Yep.
We'll
And
see.
even
I mean,
Andrew Thomas, you look at him like
yeah,
there's no way to be clear with this coaching staff. So
right.
wait and see what happens.
They got a big game coming up against the Commanders, division game. They're 1-5, and I think where we need to go with the discussion. This has been the discussion: is where does this road go if you're the general manager? You're 1-5. You have approximately like an under 4% chance of making the playoffs, realistically, by historical data. Under 4% chance of making the playoffs. With your starting quarterback dealing with a serious injury that may be career threatening, with your best offensive player, your franchise left tackle on the shelf for who knows how long, with your right tackle injured, most of your O line banged up, with key players just out, your offense really not doing anything. How does this add up to you having faith that this season is going to turn around into somehow leading to a playoff appearance, which should be the bare minimum goal if you want to continue to compete? And if you don't realistically think that it's going to go there, how do you not, in my opinion, do the responsible thing as general manager and start looking for ways to trade some of your veteran assets to get draft capital? So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that I know you saw it. I shared it earlier. Was apparently there was a quote from Pat Leonard, and he believes that at this point Saquon Barkley is playing to audition for his next team, which I hope is true because I think at this point you need to be looking to, even if it's not Saquon. I don't care if you guys want to keep Saquon, or whoever. I just want to see the fact that we're willing to move on from somebody. and show that we're thinking about towards the future of some of these guys expiring deal, because we're not keeping all of them. We're not keeping all of them. Maybe we'll keep one or two, but so that's something I want to see us start moving towards. And you know, what I don't like about what's going on right now with it is, I'll use Saquon for an example. Is do we think we helped his trade value by letting him play versus Buffalo and look like he's not healthy? Like, to me, the approach I would have taken is, look, that's the last snap Saquon's ever playing for the Giants unless they can figure it out without him. Because, like, just like he kind of did with Kadarius Toney, and I'm not comparing them like as like players, because Kadarius Toney's with cancer and Saquon's a leader in this room, but they knew they wanted to trade him, so they didn't let him back in the field even when he was healthy. And I don't think you needed to showcase Saquon Barkley. I think if you let him get healthy and pass a physical, I think people are fine with how much time he's gotten off. And we saw it this week where we were this close to not being able to trade Adoree Jackson. He
Yeah.
almost had what looked like to be a neck injury, and he was fine. But this close,
Yep.
and one of our most uh most tradable piece is gone like that. So
Yep.
he's got to do it, man, especially with a guy like Adoree Jackson who's injury prone, like a guy like Saquon Barkley who's coming off of injury. Like, I don't like Leonard Williams, a little bit different because you're gonna get a high comp pick if you don't trade him. He's a guy who's been healthy over his career. I can see, but like those two guys specifically, like, you gotta move if you're gonna do it.
I mean, even Leonard Williams, we argue about this all the time, but like, comp pick is a comp pick, but that number one, that's in 2025, not in this robust draft class, and it's not guaranteed. Like, if you try to make a move for a player, you might lose it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, these guys are on borrowed time with the Giants. It is unlikely the Giants are going to extend any of them, realistically. Not Saquon Barkley. I mean, I guess maybe Saquon Barkley. I don't know. Like, it's so
Yeah.
weird with him and the whole Mara relationship. But under normal circumstances, not Saquon Barkley, not Leonard Williams, not Adoree Jackson, maybe not Xavier McKinney. These are all guys that, like, you're realistically looking at losing at the end of the year, or at the bare minimum having to compete on the open market for their services.
Yeah. I was about to say that one thing we talked about a little bit today was like McKinney. Like, McKinney's a guy I could see us keeping.
Sure.
McKinney is not taking a contract like that we're willing to give him without seeing open market. That guy's gonna be looking for 15 plus million. And I don't think he'll get it, but he's gonna want to see if he can get it in open market first. And we
And
shouldn't just give it to him to keep it from getting there.
And also, what's to say that he's going to want to come back anyway? Let's be real. What gets safeties paid is being in a system that gets them ball production. And he has the ability for ball production. He's proven that. He
Yeah.
doesn't get ball production in Wink Martindale's defense. He's a useful player. He's a valuable player, but he does not get interceptions in this defense. He does not get ball production because Wink asks him to do a lot of different things that take away from his ball production. If he's trying to get paid, let's just say he goes on the market. Let's play out the scenario. Chauncey Gardner Johnson had the same issue, right? Let's say he hits the market and he doesn't like what he's seeing. He might just say, "All right, I'll take a 1 year deal for $10 million or something like that, and I'll go to it." But then if he does that, he's going to want to go to a defense where they can showcase his ability to be a ball hawk, and then he's going to hit the market again and try to get numbers closer to what Jesse Bates got. Not that he would get that, but he wants to be in that territory as a ball hawk. He's not going to want to be just a Jabril Peppers, or that
Yeah.
kind of safety. So there's no guarantee he's even coming back if you had him So again, I think unless he's willing to sign with you now, meaning before the trade deadline, which I don't think he will. He's signed up with David Mulugeta, who's going to want him to hit the market. The responsible thing to do in a season like this that is basically lost outside of developing players for the future is trade him. Trade him. You can, if you really want him back, you can always try to sign him back afterwards. Like, you can make that effort later, even after you trade him. But you should trade him and get something for him unless he signs right away. And there's no reason not to trade Leo. There's no reason not to trade Dory. There's no reason not to trade Saquon Barkley. I'm sorry for all the people who are going to get offended by that. He's a 26-year-old going on 27-year-old running back with a long injury history, including a recent high ankle sprain. If somebody offers you a reasonable pick for him, and I would, people are going to be offended. You got a 4th-round pick for him, you probably should seriously consider taking it because you're not even getting that in a comp pick for him if he leaves. in all likelihood.
Look what happened with Dalvin Cook. He just was straight up cut off his roster. And look, he was a productive player. He hit that 27, 28 year. And
Not a
look at him
productive player
now.
anymore. Yeah,
Look at him with the
he's
Jets.
not he's not productive
2.5
yet.
yards per carry. So, and he was as good. People are gonna hurt. He's as productive as Saquon Barkley.
Oh, he's in the same tier as Saquon Barkley in terms of production.
Yeah,
Same caliber of running back, maybe not as naturally gifted as Saquon
yeah.
Barkley.
That's the
You
one
know,
thing people have a problem with, and I agree. But yeah,
but
he's as
how long can we point to how naturally gifted you are when you've been in the league for 6 years? At
yeah,
some
and
point,
and
it's about what
and
you do in the league,
and the Vikings have a great offensive line now. They
right?
used to have a terrible offensive line.
Right. So he fell off a map, like a lot of these guys do. So there's a risk here. If you can get something for him, you should probably take it. All these guys should be on the move. And I know people say, well, how often do you see more than one or two guys get traded? How often? Well, there are some different circumstances here. Number one, how often do teams have 4 or 5 guys who are on expiring deals who have value? I don't know if that happens all that often. How often do those teams have those kinds of players and simultaneously have the worst team in football by almost every metric, like DVOA and point differential? And how often do those teams look like they're going to need a quarterback within the next year? All the stars are lining up for the Giants to be that team that actually does try to sell off all these players in a responsible way to get draft picks for this class and load up for the rebuild. All of the metrics are adding up for that. So I don't want to hear about historical, well, teams don't do that and how, screw that. It's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. It is a responsible thing to do to run your organization this way, to sell these guys whose career trajectories will not line up with whoever the next quarterback of the Giants is and when they'll likely be ready to compete. The only reason to hold on to these guys is number one, if you believe that you're going to be taken to a Super Bowl with Daniel Jones, which I don't know how you can believe that at this point. And number two, not only that, but you think you're going to bring these players back.
Yep.
And I don't see that at all. So,
Yep.
Joe Shane, what are you doing? What are we waiting for here? I really wonder. Are you waiting to see what happens against the Commanders? What happens if we beat the Commanders? Wow, we're 2-5. Now what? They're still ahead. They're still ahead of us by 2 games, or 1
Let's
game at
just
least.
hope. Let's just hope he's secretly shopping him because Kadarius Toney was a total surprise. Maybe something could be done out of nowhere, and he's already doing this.
Well, the trade deadline is on Halloween, I believe. So,
Yep.
or it's either
Got a little,
Halloween or the 3rd, but
got a little
it's right
time.
around there. Yeah, he's not a ton. He's about 10 days to get this done.
Mhm.
So let's see what Joe Shane does. Anyway, any other Giants talk before we head into the discussion of our tight end class?
No, I think that was some good Giants talk. Let's go ahead and dive into it. I think.
All right, so let's get into episode 8 here. So far, as you guys know who've been following, we've done position groups. I'll list them off quickly. Wide receiver, then interior defensive line, then edge rushers, then interior offensive line, offensive tackles, off-ball linebackers, and running backs. And now we're going to get into the final stretch here. We've got tight ends this week, followed by safeties and cornerbacks in the next 2 weeks. And then the big one coming up that everybody keeps asking us about, big both in terms of impact and in terms of sheer number of players that we have to scout for this, which is quarterbacks. Obviously, we're saving that for last, and I don't even know how we're going to do that one because there's a lot of players we got to review. But
Yeah,
we'll
we
figure
want to
that
do
out.
10. So we'll
Yeah.
see. And I'll tell you what, me and Sal probably did as much work for quarterbacks as we did for tight ends this week. We're already getting into it.
I got to tell you, man, doing tight ends this week was such a drag because
Yeah.
we're getting to that point where we know we're coming up on that quarterback class, and it just requires so much more work and looking into these guys and like seeing how they're doing.
And we
So
have a good tight end room.
yeah, and we have a good tight end room. We don't really need it, and the tight end class is a little top heavy in this draft, so we're going to get into that. But yes, we did do the tight end work because you never know. Because right now we have Waller and Bellinger, but we don't know what the future of Darren Waller is on the Giants, who does not have guaranteed money or not much guaranteed money after this year, and I think a little bit of that money was restructured, but for the most part, there's not a lot of dead money in the future, and he's 31, and who knows what they're going to do with him? We just don't know yet. But assuming he's here and Bellinger's here, I think we're pretty good. But we should get into this because there is a chance that changes, and I think that's how we should pursue this as a
Yep.
discussion. So along those lines, let's get into our top 5, starting with number 1. Monty's going to load the film, but if you don't know by now, the top tight end in America in college is Brock Bowers out of Georgia. He is 6'4", 240 pounds. He was a former four-star recruit out of California. He's a third-year player, a true junior. His parents were both college athletes. His dad was an offensive lineman, a center. His mom was like a superstar softball player, so he comes from good athletic genes. 63 receptions in 2022 for 942 receiving yards, which is just insane for a tight end. 109 rushing yards, 109 rushing yards,
Yep.
and 3 rushing touchdowns. I failed to mention he had 9 receiving touchdowns. And I'll just list off his PFF grades. He had an overall PFF grade of 90, a receiving grade of 90, and a 73.8 run blocking grade. Just incredible production. Clearly tight end one of this class, but Monty, why don't you give us your thoughts on Brock Bowers?
Yeah, and I'll say as we go through this, there's not gonna be numbers close to that guy, and he's been doing that since he was a true freshman. That's what's so special about him is that he's been doing this since he was a true freshman, and that to me that is the difference between just a normal tight end and a generational tight end. Because when you're a generational player, you come onto the scene and do this from day one. And he legitimately would have been the first tight end taken as a freshman. And he's really that good. He does everything you want out of a tight end. He is a good blocker. He is incredible after the catch. Incredible after the catch. That is to me, I think the most important trait in a tight end because you can get guys like a Mike Gesicki, who is probably one of the best hands catchers in the NFL and as athletic and can run seam routes. And where has that gotten to him in the NFL when he can't do anything after the catch? He's just another guy. But when you look at guys like George Kittle, and you look like of guys like Travis Kelsey, Rob Gronkowski, all those guys are beasts after the catch. And to that point, last year he had 479 yards after the catch. There wasn't a single tight end who even had 400 yards after the catch. He forced 15 missed tackles. He is a total beast. He has a lot of George Kittle to his game, he's a little bit smaller, a little bit of a little Kittle.
Yeah.
As you pointed out, he's 6'4", 240, and he honestly doesn't look it. It would not surprise me if he came in shorter than that. And he probably comes in about that weight at the combine, but I don't think that's his playing weight. I think he probably plays closer to the 230 mark. So that's probably, the number one concern with this guy is he doesn't really have the size aspect to it. But that's really the only negative thing I can say about him because, he has incredible hands. He's not just a willing blocker. He's a genuinely good blocker who blocks extremely well in space, jump ball, high effort. And as you pointed out, he's a guy who they line up in the backfield and he's over 100 rushing yards because he'll do sweeps, he'll do reverses. Like I can't say enough good things about this guy. I mean, like he is truly one of the best players in college football and really one of the best college football players we've seen in a long time. What else do you have to add to that, Sal?
Nothing. I mean, he's. I think he's the best tight end prospect that has come out in several years. I was kind of racking my brain thinking about where he would land. So last year, there's no doubt in my mind he would have been like a top 5, top 6 pick if he came out, if he was eligible to come out. I don't think there's any doubt about that because he was so productive in this past draft class. As a true freshman, you mentioned he would have been the first pick off the board in terms of tight ends. And I'm thinking back, that was the Trey McBride class where he was the best tight end. That was a weak class. So
Yeah,
I think Trey McBride got taken in the second round, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and
yeah.
he's largely been unimpactful in Arizona thus far. I don't know if that's
McBride
because
would have been. I mean, not McBride.
oh,
Bowers would have been a first round pick.
Yeah, easily a first round pick as a true freshman, which is insane to think about. And he was insanely productive as a freshman in Georgia. Like it's not like he was at some no name school. That was a national title school winning team as
Playing
a true
with Darnell
freshman.
Washington.
And George Pickens on that team, wasn't he?
Yeah.
In his
Yeah,
freshman
but
year, he
it's
played with
like
George
even just
Pickens.
another tight end across from who was a third round pick.
Right,
Everyone thought he was going to be a first, second.
right. This year, he's highly productive. I mean, there's nothing bad you can say about him. If there's like a couple of negatives, if you want to call it that, he maybe could put on a little bit more weight. It's sort of nitpicking because he's plenty strong. You watch him; he's a great blocker. Um,
Hmm.
he runs through people, as you see right there. He has no problem powering his way through defenders. And I guess if there's any criticism, it's despite the fact that he has this incredibly developed route tree for a tight end, maybe he could tighten up some of his routes. He rounds them out a little bit. This is really nitpicky, like for a
Yeah.
guy who's a tight end. I mean, he's going to be a meaningfully impactful player. I think the more interesting discussion about him is not so much what he profiles as, because I think he profiles as a tight end one and one of the top tight ends in the NFL once he gets here. The question to me is going to be, where does he go? I think it's an interesting conversation. We were having this discussion earlier, like he's a, he pound for pound, I would say he's like a top. Is he a top 3 overall prospect in this class? Pound for pound, top 5, certainly
Yeah.
top 5. You could make an argument
At
for top
certainly
3.
top five. I think you could.
I mean, let's talk about it.
I would not
All
fight you
right,
on
so,
it.
so so let's name our guys. Marvin Harrison Jr. definitely a top 5, maybe the top pound for pound prospect in the class.
Yep.
Caleb Williams,
Agreed.
probably 1 or 2.
Hmm.
Olu Fashanu, I think those are your 3 probably. And then I think if you look, I mean, Brock Bowers is probably the next one, right? I think he'd be ahead of Drake May in just pure prospect rating if you're going pound for pound, or would you
Yep.
have May ahead of him?
No, I think I would have him ahead of Olu as well. I think
I
he
mean,
would
there you
probably
go.
be 3.
So there you go. I mean, like, just think about that for a tight end, and everybody who knows me knows I despise the idea of a first round tight end, like with a passion. But Brock Bowers is special. He is that good. As like probably the third best prospect in this class, no worse than 4 or 5. He goes to a team and he's immediately like, you don't draft this guy to be just like a regular tight end on your offense. You draft this guy to be a centerpiece on your offense. Think Travis Kelsey level impact. I mean, I hate to put that on the kid. He hasn't been drafted yet, but he's that good. Think George Kittle level impact, right? That's what he's supposed to be in the NFL. So, what team could use Brock Bowers the best? What team that would be drafting in the top, let's say at least top 10? He's probably not going top 3, may not be going top 5, but in the top 10, he's certainly going. So, what team in the top 10 projected right now, or you think will land in the top 10, could use Brock Bowers, right? Let's think of what team that you would have to think about a team that already has a quarterback, right? Because you're probably not taking Brock Bowers if you don't have a quarterback, most likely.
Yep.
Um, and a team that really needs a dynamic receiving threat to build an offensive system around. So, who are those teams that you think will be there? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a couple teams that come to mind. Um, I think the number one team we were kind of thinking about before earlier. I think Tennessee Titans would be an interesting one because unless they're in position to draft, Caleb Williams or Drake May, they're probably best off with rolling, see if they have anything in Will Levis or Malik Willis with, what they've invested in those guys recently. And, they are somebody who built an offense around Jonnu Smith at one point in time. He was one of their, not around them, was around AJ Brown, but you know what I mean? He was highly involved in that offense. And I could see him going to Tennessee and being somebody there. New England loves their tight ends. They need a quarterback, but I would not put it past them that to take this guy.
Yeah.
Um, what? How about you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Tennessee. The spot I love for him is actually Indianapolis. Um, they've got their quarterback, although he's unfortunately lost for the year, and Anthony
Yep.
Richardson, but he was having a really solid rookie campaign. Um, I mean, they lost him just as they were getting Jonathan Taylor back, which is just so, it's really unfortunate. But at least in theory, you got a healthy Richardson back next year. You got a healthy Jonathan Taylor back under contract next year. You've got most of your O-line pieces in place. You've got a few weapons on the outside in Alec Pierce, Josh Downs. Adding a tight end like Brock Bowers to that room could dynamically change things, right? I think
Yeah.
you give Anthony Richardson this target. First of all, Anthony Richardson throws the ball 250 miles per hour. So you
Yeah.
want someone who's not going to drop the ball. Well, Brock Bowers doesn't drop anything. He can catch just about anything you throw at him. So having a target like him who can get open in the middle of the field and be like that amazing route running safety valve for his quarterback who's just going to be able to sling it at him, I think would be amazing to watch. So I think that would be a perfect spot for him. Tennessee certainly makes sense. We mentioned the Jets. If the Jets are drafting in the top
Jets.
10,
Yep.
with Aaron Rodgers coming back healthy, do they say, you know what, we could really use a Brock Bowers to build this offense around? Aaron Rodgers could just feast with this guy. I think the Jets are going to be in the market for a tackle personally, but you made a good point earlier when you told me, hey, they could take this guy and sign, they could sign a tackle, or they can draft a tackle
Lieutenant
later.
Jonah Williams or something. Yeah.
Right. I mean, what's more impactful, a player like him or a tackle? That's how good Bowers is. The teams have to have that discussion. If you have the
Yeah.
quarterback in place, you have to consider Bowers over just about every other prospect in this class, just to give you an idea of how impactful this player is.
Yeah, and offensive tackles, a lot of not always. There's always a Tristan Wirfs and Slaters of the world, but a lot of offensive tackles struggle as a rookie. You know what? More tight ends struggle as a rookie, but I don't think that's gonna be Bowers. I mean, look, like we talked about, this dude had a 92 PFF grade as a freshman at 18 years old. Like
Yeah,
this guy,
he's
I have no
he,
doubt will succeed in the NFL right away.
he was NFL ready as a freshman, which is insane to think about. But he's just getting better and better.
Yeah,
Is he going to be a giant? Uh,
that's the
right.
question.
You know, the only way I can see Brock Bowers ending up as a giant, I'd probably be really pissed off. Like honestly, if we drafted Brock Bowers, I would probably destroy my new TV. And I'd hate to do that because it's a really nice TV,
Do it
but
in the projector, so you just throw it at the wall.
it's cheaper. That's true. I could replace a
Yeah.
projector screen easier. Um, you're right. I should watch the draft downstairs. That's a good point. um, I guess this is the world in which the Giants could take Brock Bowers. They're drafting in the top 10, but somehow, some way, they miss out not only on Caleb Williams and Drake May, but perhaps even their QB3 that they would have taken. Somehow they just can't get there. He's also the best player on the board, better than tackles or defensive players, which he probably would be at that point. And they've also somehow gotten rid of Darren Waller, right? If they've traded Darren Waller at that point and they've gotten some draft capital back for him, and they want to continue with like a 12 personnel system and have Bowers and Bellinger be like the monsters of this tight end room. Those are the only scenarios in which I can see it happening. But you still don't have a quarterback. You still need a quarterback, so you still got to go back and find someone. So it's a tough scenario for the Giants, but I guess that's the scenario where you're going to figure out a way to get a quarterback a little later, either trade back in the first round and get somebody, or get somebody in the second round, and you've missed on all the others, and you've moved on from Waller. A lot of different things have to happen for him to be a realistic, viable option for the Giants.
So I have a question for you, just to play into this a little bit. So let's say um top two quarterbacks off the board. Let's say as a front office, we've decided that there's no quarterback three like that should be taken in the top 15 picks. Let's say.
You're
Um,
teasing the quarterback discussion. Go ahead. Yeah. All right.
how many player like off the top of your head, what are player? When would you just have to say? Like, I know neither of us want to take Brock Bowers. It's just not a premium position. But at what point do you say, "Fuck, I got to take Brock Bowers"? You can't trade.
Yeah. So again, if you can't get a quarterback and you're not gonna, let's say, quote, reach for one. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you're drafting 7. You try moving up, you couldn't do it. You're
Mhm.
stuck at 7,
Yep.
and or make it even easier, like 5. Right? You're stuck at 5. You've lost out on the 2 quarterbacks. You've lost out on Marvin Harrison Jr. Olu Fashanu's off the board. So what do you have sitting there? Joe Alt, Dallas Turner,
Guys made a big rise for some we talked about earlier. Big rise this year.
some of the other tackles like Mims, Brock Bowers, right? That's who's on the board at that point.
Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, Neighbors. So your choices are either reach a little bit to get a more premium position or a cornerback, right? Like Kool-Aid McKinstry is going to be up there. We haven't gotten that yet, but you could reach for somebody like Neighbors, which is a little bit of a reach that high. You could, even though he's a great player, you could take a cornerback, which you could always use if you're going BPA. But to be honest, you would be leaving the best player on the board. So when is it too? Honestly, you have to start having that discussion at 5. As much as it disgusts me to think about it.
Yeah, I know.
You have to have that discussion. But here's the thing: that's why, like, going into this class, like, you have to have a plan with Darren Waller. Like, you need to know what you're doing with Waller to avoid this scenario being one where it hits you on draft night and you're like, oh shit, what do I do? I've got this. I'm going to use the word generational prospect, not player, but a generational prospect staring me in the face. Am I going to turn down the generational prospect for a lesser player at a more premium position?
Yep.
And that's the big question. I would do it for a quarterback 100 out of 100 times, but for every other position, you really have to think long and hard about, am I going to do it? Personally, I would probably take, I'd probably take Dallas Turner over Brock Bowers.
I would
too. Because he's just a phenomenal edge rusher, and adding that to our room and turning Aziz into edge 3 would, I think, dynamically change this defense. I might take Kool-Aid McKinstry too.
I think I would definitely consider a premium position blue chipper over it. But if I don't think you're a blue chip prospect, then I can't justify you over a generational one, even if it's not premium position, especially because I don't think tight end is as like unpremium as like a running back is.
Well, and here's the other scenario, and we're gonna have an excessively long tight end discussion, but whatever, fuck it.
It's the only guy worth talking about. It's okay.
Right. Don't worry, the rest of these are not so interesting. But tune in. Don't leave us.
Don't shut it off.
Don't shut up. Somebody's gonna want Brock Bowers. He's that good. So if you're sitting at 5, right? He's one of the rare tight end / position players that somebody will want to trade up to get. That's how good he is. So here's a team that might. I don't know if they would do it, but Travis Kelce is what, 36 years old now? 37? He is the centerpiece. He's the focal point centerpiece of that Kansas City Chiefs offense. That offense completely, obviously, it's all Patrick Mahomes. But in terms of 34.
Anyway,
okay.
Yeah, I thought he was old.
Yeah, but he's been talking about retirement for a couple of years now. Like he's
successful podcast.
He's got a successful podcast. He's dating freaking Taylor Swift. He's done, dude. Yeah, you don't know her. She's like this up and coming, like, young singer. Yeah. So he's dating Taylor Swift. He's got a podcast with his brother. He's been talking about retirement. He's won 2 Super Bowls. He's going to go into the Hall of Fame probably as the greatest tight end ever, at least in the discussion with Gronk and guys like Tony Gonzalez. Like, he's in that caliber already. Maybe the number 1. If he decides to hang it up, let's just say the Chiefs do what they usually do. They make a surge at the end of the season. They realize we're the Kansas City Chiefs. We're just going to go win the Super Bowl again, right? We have Patrick Mahomes. And he was like, can't you see him hanging it up at that point and being like, yeah, I'm done. I'm good. That Chiefs offense needs a guy like him. What if the Kansas City Chiefs come knocking on the door and say, Giants, I know we're drafting 32 overall, and that sucks.
Not from 32.
Yeah. Or let's say they trade up a couple of times, whatever. Like, that's a team that I could see trying to make a push, or teams in that caliber. Even the Dallas Cowboys, you may not want to trade him to the Dallas Cowboys, but there are teams that are going to want Brock Bowers. That's the point. Like, teams are going to want to trade up for him, and you could get a king's ransom for a freaking tight end. That's how good he is.
That's where I was kind of going with it too, was that I know I said no trade backs, and I think it's a discussion worth having, But I think Brock Bowers, Marvin Harrison, and Olu Fashanu are the like 3 guys who are non-quarterback, so you get borderline quarterback trade up value for. I mean, it's not guaranteed, but I think it's something I could easily see happening. I mean, you look at Will Anderson. Will Anderson got a quarterback haul for the Texans
Yeah.
to come up, and
And
you look at teams and it's possible. I mean, I know they're already loaded, but look at like the Bengals have a bad year. They're having a bad one here. They don't make playoffs or they don't get far into it. I could see them say, fuck it. Let's take advantage of an off year and come up and get like and he's also going to be cheaper. He's going to be easier to help build cap around whenever you have to re-sign him because he's a tight end. So, there's a thought process there.
the league is moving more and more towards tight ends being an important centerpiece of the offense, partially because it's a good response to the bend but don't break defensive style that's out there, where these guys live in the middle of the field, and they're cheaper. You know,
Mhm.
they're pound for pound, they make less money for the same level of production as wide receivers by
Helps
a
Kansas
lot.
City a lot.
So it's something to think about. But anyway, I think it's a good discussion because it ties into like giant strategy, league strategy, how teams will approach this. But it also ties into like we're now getting to the point where we've discussed so many positions and so many players that now we keep saying this is a phenomenally loaded draft class. This is an illustration of how loaded this draft class is. That a tight end is going to be somebody that I can easily see having near quarterback level trade value on draft day. So draft position matters for a lot of reasons, but in this class, all of these top 5 to 6 picks are absolute, Fort Knox gold. These things are highly valuable picks.
Yep.
Anyway, you got anything else on Brock before we move on to number two?
No, I think we just about hit
Tw-
everything we could have with him.
20 minutes of Brock Bowers. I love it.
Yeah.
All
Hey,
right.
but
Well,
we got some guys at the end here, so keep around for our my
we got
guys.
other
Yeah.
guys, and by the way, these guys at the end. Sorry to tell you, Giant fans, but these are the guys more likely to be targets of the Giants, so they're worthy of listening to. So why don't you introduce us to number two here?
Sure. So let me go ahead and just pull him up here. But this number 2 guy he goes by the name of Javion Sanders, out of University of Texas. Horns down. But 6'4", 243 pounds. He's in his 3rd year. He was a 5-star recruit. He was, a big time recruit coming into college. He was also a basketball player in high school. And he put up good numbers last year. 613 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns on 54 receptions. He had a 70.8 PFF grade, which I know that's nothing compared to Brock Bowers, but you're not going to see any more 90s, really even 80s in here. Just a heads up on that one. That Brock Bowers is a one of one.
Yeah.
But a 76.1 receiving grade and a 59.7 run blocking grade. So, yeah, he's a good player, man. I definitely is, I think, the clear number 2 tight end in this class. But tell us a little bit more about him.
Yeah, number two, good tight end. I think there's a significant drop off, as you mentioned, in terms of the value here versus Brock Bowers, but this is a solid tight end. So what strikes you when you see him is he's an excellent athlete. As you mentioned, he was recruited out of high school to play defensive end. I think he played tight end, defensive end, linebacker. He played all these different positions where he settled in. But I'm sorry, not linebacker, but tight end, defensive end, and wide receiver. 5-star recruit. He's very versatile. You can line him up in line. You can line him up bunch. You can line him up split out wide. He's really good coming out of a 3-point stance as a receiver. So you see lots of reps where he lines up in a 3-point stance, and he has this incredible burst off the line. It's really kind of uncanny. You don't see tight ends burst off the line like that. But his value is as a receiver, plain and simple. He can block. He can block reasonably well, like especially in space. He can be a move blocker, against smaller defenders, and he can pancake smaller defenders because he's kind of a big guy. He's listed at 6'4", 245. He looks a lot bigger than that. Whereas Brock Bowers is listed at 6'4", 240, and he looks a lot smaller than this guy. Um, but he's not a very good inline blocker. I think at the line of scrimmage, you're going to see defensive ends destroy this guy. So what he is basically somebody who can line up inline, but his job is really to get out and be a receiving threat. And where he excels is running vertical routes, like seam vertical routes, seam posts. He has a pretty good route tree, and I think he has the athletic upside to develop a more diverse route tree. But he stretches the field as a tight end. That's his value. And what he does really well over and over again on film is he stretches the field. He gets good separation right off the snap, and then he uses his body. Right, he's faster than you would expect to get down the field, and then he uses his full frame to basically shield off defenders and get in position to catch the ball, and then he high points it. And he's a big dude, so when he's high pointing everything and he's shielding defenders, he's almost undefendable. Indefensible. I don't know what term you want to use, but he's tough to stop when he's running vertical routes, and he's a threat in the vertical game. A little bit of like a Darren Waller type, a guy who can stretch the field and use his frame. Um, but that's kind of it. He's a receiving tight end who's got a big enough frame where he can be a useful, willing blocker. But I don't think you can expect this guy to be a key component of your run game. I just don't think he's that kind of guy. Like he has to be complemented by a guy like Daniel Bellinger, who can be a real blocking threat. He's not somebody who's going to be like an H back, that like a true like almost like a fullback position. He's more of a receiver than he is that. But
Yeah.
that's kind of what I got on him. I don't know what other thoughts you have.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said. And that's definitely true where he is today. Maybe he could develop more as a blocker. I mean, this guy is it's very clear when you see him on this field, this guy's going to be an NFL player. He's an NFL athlete. He's got an NFL body. Like he looks like a tight end. He fits the mold of what you're looking for. Um, I think you hit home on what his strengths are, with his that burst off the line, especially going vertical. But he's such a good hands catcher and he's so versatile. Um, you see him line up outside as an outside receiver sometimes. This game up here right now, I just pulled up this tape versus Alabama, and you saw him line up in a goal line fade versus Kool-Aid McKinstry, their number one corner. So that's what they kind of think of this guy. He is a very valuable player in that offense, and he can go up and high point a ball. So it's no surprise that they would put him in that type of situation. One of my favorite things about him is the way that he shields defenders off when he goes up for a ball. I think
Yeah.
and you see it really consistently on the tape is that every single time he goes up for a ball, he really just uses that big frame to keep defenders from getting in on him, and he constantly does it. He uses really good body positioning, and that's probably my favorite thing about him when I'm watching him on tape. I would say, probably what worries me most about him is last year he was really bad with penalties. Um, he had 7 total penalties and 4 false starts and 3 holds, so that worried me. Um, but he's having a good year so far this year. I really like what I've seen so far. He's averaging 2.16 yards per route, which is really, really good. That's high end elite type numbers. He has no drops this year. Um, he has 13.1 yards after catch per reception, which is number one among all tight ends in FBS right now. So again, just
Yeah.
really,
Number two is Bowers at
yep,
9.8. So he's actually beating Bowers in that metric by
yep.
a decent amount.
Yeah, and that was Bauer's game last year, but he's doing a really good job. And then he has an average depth of target of 11.7 yards this year, which again is fourth in among FBS tight ends. So
Yeah.
uh really good year. He's starting to do what we wanted him to go into this year and kind of show he can be that top end tight end. Ultimately I think he is a second rounder, probably. I'm not gonna overhype this guy, but he's a good tight end prospect.
Yeah.
Just not well rounded.
He's solid.
Yeah.
He's I think again another potential replacement if you get rid of Darren Waller.
Mhm.
He fits that mold. He would be complemented well by a guy like Daniel Bellinger, but not a guy I would invest heavy capital in. And again, if you think about the Giants needs, like why would you do it? If your goal is to replace Daniel Bellinger with this guy, like it just doesn't make sense. You're better off just keeping Darren Waller with this guy. You're better off just keeping Darren Waller. So I don't see too many scenarios in which he ends up on the Giants. How about you?
No. No, I don't see
Yeah.
it. And he's a good player. I've seen worse players with worse upside get drafted in the second round of the tight end position, but it just does. It's, again, a lot of these guys aren't going to be fit. He's going to be second
Well,
round
and
pick.
he's going to be a good fantasy player for those who are like scouting for fantasy purposes. Like
Mhm.
he's gonna be a red zone target.
Yeah,
He's a big
agreed.
he's got a big frame. The way he catches balls, as you mentioned, like shielding defenders, like he's a red zone dream. So he's gonna be a good fantasy player.
And he's really stepped up his yards after catch this year, which again I hammered home on Bowers is super important to me. I think it's just a
Yep.
trait you see in all these top tight ends. So, but
That's
yeah,
all I got on him. Do you have anything else on him or
no, that's all I have as well.
all
So, I'll go ahead and
right.
we can move
Let
on
me
to our next guy.
You see, that was a lot faster, guys. Number
Yeah.
3, and let me just tell you, there's a big drop from Bowers to Sanders. There's a precipitous drop in potential draft value from Sanders to the rest of the guys. And that's how this tight end class is. And that's what we were talking about. Now we're getting in the territory of day 3. Believe it or not, a lot of these guys are like borderline day 3, maybe if they're lucky, sneaking into day 2 consideration. But I think it's just those two guys, honestly. But number 3 is Cade Stover. He's from the Ohio State University. I hate saying that, but that's how they say it. 6'4", 251 pounds, 5-star, 50-year player, but a 4-star recruit, Mr. Ohio, Mr. Ohio. You can get into that later, but he had 36 receptions for 406 yards in 2022, 5 touchdowns. He had an overall PFF grade of 69.2. As you can see, there's a drop there. 70.5 run blocking grade, which I think underestimates his value a little bit. And I'll just leave it at that. What are your thoughts on Cade Stover?
I really liked Cade Stover, man. Where like you said, there is the top two guys in this class. There's a clear one, then there's a clear two, and then there's a group of guys. And I think you could really put these in any order you want. But I'm a big fan of Cade Stover. Yes, he's a fifth year player. This is fifth year in college football. But as you alluded to, we're going to talk about with he was, Mr. Ohio, but he was a linebacker in high school and a
Yeah.
very good one at that one. He was a great linebacker. He was also a great basketball player in high school. He set records in high school playing basketball. And when he got brought into Ohio State, they actually brought him in to play defense. He started his fresh playing. Well, he started playing as a freshman as a D end, um, and then they went ahead and moved him to tight end in 2020, and then he got moved back to defense and played linebacker, and he got moved back to tight end. I think got moved back to linebacker one more time, I believe,
Yeah.
like when there was
Yeah.
injuries.
They've
Um,
done everything they can to ruin this kid. Sorry. Gaslighting. Sorry. But, but go ahead. Yeah.
but
I'm
but
gonna take a
yeah,
shot every time I can.
But yeah, despite all that, man, he's a really like well-rounded player for like how much he's had to move around and been like a team guy. Um, one thing I really like about him is he is such a strong runner after the catch. He is
Yeah.
just very physical. Last year he had 211 yards after the catch and 8 missed tackles forced, which is a really good number. He only had a 44.4 contested catch rate. I say only, that's still a really good number, but some of these guys have some ridiculous numbers. But uh it's actually very solid, but he is a good athlete, and I think the number one thing that people will talk about when you hear about Cade Stover is he's a really good blocker, He competes his ass off as a blocker. But I think he's underrated as a receiver. I said it a couple times now. Yards after catch is a big thing to me, and he is just how physical he is. You see that hurdle right now if you're watching. He's a good athlete. He's not a great athlete. He's not nearly the athletes that we talked about before, but he's a good enough athlete, I think, to play tight end at the next level. And I think he um has a really good understanding of the game for a guy who has moved around so much. I think some of it probably helped him. I see him finding like the soft spot in coverage a lot, and that
Yeah.
probably is understanding what the defense is trying to do. I think that probably gives him an advantage. But you know I think he's getting a lot of vibes of being like a tight end too in the NFL, which I see, but I think he'd be a really good tight end too. And I think that he's a guy who could be like I'm trying like a Pat Fryermuth type. He's not quite the athlete Pat Fryermuth is, but I could see that type of player in the NFL for him. I do really like him, but he ultimately is probably like a round 3 to 5 guy, I'd have to say. What do you have anything else on him?
Yeah, he's ascending. I didn't think I was gonna like him as much as I did when I decided to watch him, but like I started watching him more and more, and you could even see on that Ohio State team in 2022 with C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr. And I guess they had Jason for a little bit. He was basically there to be essentially an extra offensive lineman. I mean, his job was basically to be the key blocker in the run game. And that's what he does really at a high level already. He's an outstanding blocker, especially in terms of setting up explosive run plays. I mean, he really was the key to Travion Henderson's explosive runs last year. He was a lead blocker several times. He would line up his H-back, plow his way and create like a big running lane. And he's in space, in line, any way you set him up, like on the line of scrimmage against defensive ends, it's just a really damn good blocker. So right away, he has sort of like that basic trait of a throwback tight end that you can say he can do that. He has a spot on your team, right? He can block really well and he can move really well for a guy who's a pretty good athlete. I think the knock on him was, well, he's not that productive yet as a receiver, but you could see even last year, like you mentioned, like he runs pretty decent routes. He's not super fast, but he runs pretty solid routes. He finds soft spots in his zone, and he's pretty good after the catch. He's strong. He's got reliable hands. The question coming into the season was, will he be a more dynamic playmaker and productive pass receiver? Well, here are some numbers from this year. In last year, he had 36 receptions on 49 targets over the course of 13 games. This year, in just 6 games, he's had 29 targets and 23 receptions. So he's on pace for close to 50 receptions this year. He's already got 359 yards, which is just about 50 yards less than he had all of last year at 406. He's on pace for over 700 yards receiving this year. He's already got 3 touchdowns. He only had 5 last year. So he's basically on pace for 50 receptions, 700 yards receiving, and 6 touchdowns with 2.43 yards per route run, which is really high.
Yeah.
A you
And we
know
just talked about the last guy being really good, and
he
that's
has
even higher.
zero drops, and he has a 75% contested catch rate this year, and he's keeping up his run blocking, so he's becoming a bigger target on that Ohio State offense, and that's despite having Marvin Harrison Jr. and despite having Emeka Egbuka there. He's becoming a more forceful weapon for them in the passing game. So he's kind of putting it together, right? He's a guy that you're looking at and say, yeah, he's a well-rounded tight end. I'm not so sure he's a tight end two. I think he's a tight end one. He
Yeah,
may not be a high-end tight end one, but I think he's a solid tight end one in the NFL. And he's
I
not going to
agree.
be Brock Bowers. He's not going to be the dynamic, deep field threat that Sanders is. But he's a very reliable. I think Fryermuth is that's a really good comp for him. A guy who's just a very reliable guy. Fryermuth went at the top of round 2 in 2021.
But I think it
And
was bottom around 2.
was it bottom round 2? I'm sorry, but he
Yeah,
went
'cause I
round
think
2.
we could have drafted him, but we didn't.
Okay, so but it was a second round pick.
Yeah.
And could I see this guy crawling his way into second, like mid to late second round, early third round consideration. Yeah,
Mhm.
if he keeps up this pace, especially if he tests well, which I think he will because he was such a good athlete coming out of high school, he's going to probably climb up. You
That
know,
changes
uh,
everything if he tests
yeah.
well.
To be honest, he's a lot like Daniel Bellinger. He's
Mhm.
very similar. You know, he Daniel Bellinger when he came out, if people remember, made his chops as a run blocker, a really solid blocker, both in space and in line at the line of scrimmage, and could be used as split zone as an H back. He that's how he got his name on the map. And the question was, would he be a good receiver once he got to the NFL? And he proved to be a good receiver. But if you looked at his tape from San Diego State, he was always a reliable pass catcher. He just didn't get a lot of opportunities, but he ran fairly good routes. He found soft spots in zones. He had good hands. He didn't drop anything, and he translated that to the NFL level. And you're seeing Stover do that at Ohio State already. So I think guys in that ilk, right? Fryermuth, Daniel Bellinger. That's what Stover is. I think he's
Yeah.
in that category.
And and
Good
I'll
athlete.
say I'm probably driving people nuts with it because I keep saying it for every guy, but the biggest difference between him and Daniel Bellinger, because there is a lot of similarities there, is Daniel Bellinger doesn't offer much after the catch. This guy does. I mean,
Yeah.
even this year, again, talking about it, he has 8.6 yards per reception after the catch. That's fourth among FPS tight ends. He
Yeah.
has 5 missed tackles forced. That is fifth among FBS tight ends. He is on track to have 10 missed tackles forced. You got to love this half the season here where our math gets easy and we can just double
Yeah.
everything. It's nice.
Yeah.
um,
No,
but
he's a good player, man. He's a solid NFL player. Does he fit the Giants? Probably not, because you have Bellinger. I don't know if you need two Bellingers,
yeah,
especially if he's a day two pick.
yeah,
If he's there, if he somehow falls into day three, he might be a valuable player. But
mhm.
he's another one who's gonna be a solid NFL pro. Is he a Pro Bowler or All Pro? I don't think so. But is he a solid, reliable tight end in the NFL? Yes, I think so.
Yeah. And, as we're talking about more and more, like, look, I think we're very much off of like consensus is we've laid it out perfectly. It is 1, 2, 3 as far as tier gaps, but I'll be honest with what I look for in a tight end. If I was, looking fresh, I think I would have Cade Stover way closer to Davion Sanders than, how he's going to be looked at by draft pundits and among teams. I prefer those blocking chops in my tight ends. So
Oh,
they're definitely closer in my book.
awesome. All right, man. Do you want to go over? You want to get in number three? You can introduce him. We're up to number
4.
four. I'm sorry. Why don't you introduce number four, and we'll go
Yep.
into him a little bit more.
I pull him up and I'll go ahead and introduce him. So our number 4 guy here is Ben Sinnott. And he's out of Kansas State. He's 6'4", 245 pounds. He's in his 4th year. He was actually a 0-star recruit coming into Kansas State. In 2022, he had 31 receptions for 441 yards and 4 touchdowns. He had a PFF grade of 66.4, 69.7, and a 58.8 run blocking grade. So again, not crazy numbers. He's just outside of 70 on some of these. Like I said, that's kind of the territory we're looking with a lot of these guys. But why don't you kind of go into what to like about this guy outside the numbers?
I really like this guy. I think I like him more than you do.
Yeah,
And I
he's
think
up
part of the
there.
reason I think the part of the reason I like him is because he was a zero-star recruit and a walk-on.
Yeah.
This is like your prototypical Charlie Hustle, the guy who's going to basically just lay his life on the line for the football team. And like he proved it, right? As a zero-star recruit, he works his way up at Kansas State, becomes in the discussion as one of the top tight ends in the country. When you watch his tape, he's kind of a modern day tight end. I think this is a do it all kind of guy. This is a guy who really often, when you watch K State, they have him lined up as H back the majority of the time. On the majority of snaps, he's either in line or he's truly lined up as an H back. And his role is to serve as a lead blocker on runs and to set up the run game. But when they go play action, as you see, excuse me for a second.
H-back and then play action right there.
Right. When they go play action or they just go pure pass sets, they're looking for him, and he's essentially the primary target. And he's a good route runner, like for a guy who's built like a kind of a standard tight end H back size. This guy is really fast. He gets into his breaks very smooth. He accelerates at the stem. He runs a pretty complete route tree for a tight end, and he just speeds up and gets good separation. Something you don't always see with these tight ends. He's versatile. Like I said, he can line up as an H-back, he can line up in line. You can even line him up in the slot. He's quick enough to do that. He's a very good hands catcher. When you watch him, he's so reliable. Like he gets into the break, the ball comes his way, his hands go out, he catches it, doesn't really drop much. He had a 67% contested catch rate, so he catches in traffic very well. Where I really like him though is how he would be utilized for an offense like ours. He's so good as a route runner in the middle of the field that he just opens up the middle of the field for other people. And that's how I'm envisioning him because he carries safeties. They have to respect him. They carry him through his route tree. And if you have a guy like him running really good routes in the middle of the field, it really opens up things for a guy like Jalen Hyatt, who is your deep threat. I think that's his value for a team like that. He can block well. He's not a great blocker, but he's solid. Um, I think he does a pretty good job with leverage. He doesn't do a good job with angles. You see defensive ends blowing him up when he takes bad angles sometimes. But I think that's something that can be developed. Overall, like there's nothing spectacular about this guy's game, but he's just a good all-around tight end. And I think, like I said, his value is being able to be used in the backfield, kind of like a fullback, H-back, fullback, and a guy who runs good routes and sets up the deep game for you. So he's a valuable player. And again, he's not going to go early in this draft. I mean, this is a day 3 guy. I mean, I have a hard time seeing him claw his way out of like the 4th round. I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes in the 5th or 6th round, to be totally honest. So this is a guy with value. Well, you can add him to your tight end room, and your tight end room is a lot better. And you see teams like the Ravens do this, right? Even though they have Mark Andrews, they added other players. They added Charlie Kohler. They added Isaiah Likely. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't hurt to have good players on your team, especially if you get them with value. So where I don't want to necessarily spend, a first round pick or a second round pick on a tight end with our current tight end room, a guy like Sinnott, taken middle of day 3, I think that does have value in adding depth to your tight end room because we don't have it right now, quite frankly, behind our top 2 guys.
We literally don't have a third tight end on the roster right now.
Right, they put Cager on in the practice squad, right?
I mean,
So
he's straight up released right now, but I'm sure he'll sign back in the practice.
that's right. So like this is the kind of guy that you would keep and keep on your roster. Like you should have 3 tight ends, and if you have if you have a Waller and you have a Bellinger, who should your third tight end be? I think some of that depends on what your wide receiver room looks like. But a guy like Sinnott is versatile.
Mm-hmm.
I think he can play behind both those guys. Whereas Chris
Yeah.
Myrick, he couldn't do what Darren Waller does. He can't really run routes. He's basically a pure H-back type, right? An inline blocker and an H-back. That's all he can do. This guy can do those things. Maybe he can't do it at an elite level, but he's a solid player. So this is a target. I think this is a guy the Giants could easily target on day 3. And that's why I like him. I think he's a good player.
Yeah, man. I like him. You nailed it. I think that, as far as a tight end goes, he's a good route runner. He changes direction well for his size. I know, Kansas State doesn't ask even their wide receivers to run like a very diverse route tree, but for what he does it very well for tight end. Very good at changing direction. He throttles well at like the stem of the route. And I think he's a good blocker too. He definitely has some struggles, you know, lining up the blocker sometimes, especially when he's on the move. But he plays low, and he's a strong dude who can move defenders pretty well.
Yeah, he's not Cade Stover out there, but I
No,
think he's solid. Like again, I don't. This is not a. He's not really like a. In your tight end room, he's tight end 3. I think that's as long as you view him as like tight end 2/3 in a good tight end room, he's a valuable player,
yeah, and
and
I
and
think he
that's
could
how
be
I
a
look at him.
tight end 2 on a team. Not
Yeah,
our team, but I think he'd be
yeah,
tight end 2.
right.
He had, let's see, he had 130 yards in yak last year, 7 missed tackles, and 66.7 contested catch rate. So all like really good numbers.
Can't you see him being used like a true fullback too? Just the way he
Yeah,
lines up. Like this is a versatile player, and you
he
could make use of him in a modern NFL offense.
Yeah, he could help out everywhere. Like you said, like he could if Darren Waller's hurt, he could help do some of what Darren Waller is. Not a lot. Like he's not replacing Darren Waller, but
Yeah, but
you want
nobody's replacing Darren
yeah,
Waller, right?
exactly. He does enough where, you can have a tight end who can help out in the receiving game. If more importantly, if Daniel Bellinger goes out, he's a good blocker. He's a guy who can run out of the fullback like we do with Daniel Bellinger, like those things. The other notes I have on him, I think he's a good athlete. Said he was a tough runner. He really is a tough runner. He high points balls really well. He had really good concentration when on his catches. Like there's one in the tape earlier. He was catching the ball really low to the ground. You really had to, scoop that so it didn't hit the ground. That kind of plays into that. And he's also having a really good year this year. He's another guy who's been a little bit of a riser. So far this year, he has a 76.7 PFF grade, a 74.8 receiving grade, and a 75.2 run blocking grade. So
Yeah,
huge bumps there. And like
he's
all really good numbers.
he's trending exactly like Cade Stover. Like he's taking
Yeah.
that leap as a receiver. He's a better blocker this year. Like
Mhm.
he's rising. Again, he's not the upside of some of these other guys. He's just a solid player. So I like him. He's definitely my four. I don't know if you have anything else to add, but this is a guy, Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State, that if Giant fans are curious about, like, if they're psychopaths like we are, and they're looking at, how do you add depth to each room? This is a player where I view him as like a good depth piece if you can find him mid to late day three.
I'll
But
I'll
we'll see how it goes.
I'll say one negative from his play so far this season. His hands haven't been the best this year. He has a 7.4% drop rate, so he has 2 drops on the year, and he has a 28.6 contested catch rate, so definitely lower. So he's been struggling a little bit this year. But with that said, his average depth of target has been 11.5. So a really,
Yeah.
really good average depth target for a tight end. So yeah, but I mean, overall is having a good year, but those are a couple of things to keep an eye on with him. But
And to give you guys perspective on like the big board, like I'm gonna look at like the PFF big board to give you like the difference in where these guys are valued. So Brock Bowers right now is listed overall as a fifth overall pick on the big board.
mhm.
Jatavian Sanders, 40th overall. So top five pick, top of the second round pick. Cade Stover, all the way down to 138. Right now we're in basically the fourth round, the end of the fourth round, really. And I'm not even sure that might be the beginning of the fifth, but I think with comp picks, that's probably the end of the fourth round.
Yep.
Ben Sinnott, 157. So we're like firmly into fifth round territory here, people. Like this is not like a player you're going to expend significant draft capital if these things hold true, and he's still a valuable piece. So that's my four. Unless you have anything else, we should probably move on to number five.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on
Now,
to our
yeah,
next guy, and we'll almost through last guy of our final five. So we'll
I'll
go
introduce
ahead.
him. Yeah,
Yep.
when you load him up. So our number five, this guy both of us really like, which I don't think we expected to. Surprise, surprise, he's from Iowa. Of course, he's from Iowa. You can't do a tight end list without a guy from Iowa. It's Luke Lachey. He's from Iowa. He's 6'6", 253 pounds, four-star recruit. He's in his fourth year. Downside, he injured his ankle this year and he's out right now. And I don't know when he's coming back. We're hoping he comes back for the end of the season, hopefully by the bowl game, but he's not playing right now.
Mhm.
But this guy's an athlete. Played wide receiver, tight end, defensive back in high school. Was a basketball player. He ran track. So he's an all-around athlete. Wasn't super productive last year at 28 receptions for 398 yards, but he did have 4 touchdowns. He had a 69.8 overall PFF grade, 77.7 receiving grade, which is really good, but only a 50.8 run blocking grade. Those are his stats. I'll leave it there. What are your thoughts on Lachey, Monty?
I like him. I'll actually say he's actually one of the first guys I watched when I did this. I had a buddy who I told he was asking me when we were doing the tight end episode. I was like, "We're actually doing it this week." He's a Dolphins fan, so that's like one of their top needs. And he was telling me this was his guy, and I checked him out. I'm like, I looked at him like, yeah, this guy will make the list. And we actually had him at 4, but we bumped him down because of the ankle injury, and we just felt, because of that, we had to move him down to 5. But I think he's a really good player. I mean, in in high school, like you said, he was, wide receiver, tight end, DB. These guys are really good athlete. He had 157 yards after catch, so really a guy who was showed that athleticism once he got the ball in his hands. He only had 3 missed tackles forced, but it was really so much his athleticism and such a big body at 6'6", 250 pounds. He has some some of the best hands I've seen in this class. Like
Yeah.
outside of like Brock Bowers, he has just really good hands. He looks so natural when the ball comes into him. He's competing for contested catches. uh, I mentioned that he doesn't necessarily have the missed tackles, and the numbers back that up. But when I saw it on tape, it's not that he was always getting like killed. Like that was a problem I had with Musgrave from who the Packers drafted. He
Yeah, from
he was just
Washington.
a
Yeah.
or
Washington.
Oregon State.
Oregon. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. He was a guy who got tackled by everybody, no matter how small. While, some of the bigger guys can hit hit him and kind of like stop him, but he really drags the smaller guys, and he gets a lot of yardage. He's always kind of falling forward, fighting for the first yard. It's just he's not really shaking them loose enough and keeping his balance and continuing the run. So that's been kind of a problem with them. But you know, when you're looking at these Iowa tight ends,
Yeah.
these guys are constantly pushing out good athletes, good football players, and it's a safe place to draft tight ends out of. You know, they obviously it's disappointing we can't watch him this year. But, just for example of kinda like what he can be when he's in number 1 in this offense, there was a game that, Laporta was out last year versus Nebraska, and he had
Yeah.
7 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown in that game. So,
Right.
that's just a little bit of a taste about what he could be. I think he's a good blocker. He could be better, but he fires into his blocking assignment, and really gets that initial hit on him to kind of give a chance for the running back to make their move and get their play. But what else do you have on it? Because I know this was a guy you were a fan of it as well.
Yeah, you hit most of it. I think the key here is I think that he is a productive player in an offense that doesn't have a lot of productive players, and that I think part of the reason Iowa's tight ends are so good when they get to the NFL is because they're used to being the primary targets for a very dull offensive system. And I think that they do really well, and they're keyed on, so they're used to fighting through through contact and through traffic to get yardage. He does that pretty well, but he doesn't do it like you said. Like he doesn't break a lot of tackles. He's a big dude. He has good hands. What I liked about him is that despite his size, what he's really good at is just finding the soft spots in his zone. He's a very good route runner,
I saw
and
that
he
too.
just yeah, like he always finds he there's a ton of routes on film where he either runs a nice little comeback route and presents a wide target, which is what you want from a guy his size, catches the ball with his hand, he's reliable, you're not gonna knock the ball out of his hand. Or he runs like deeper routes or more complex routes, and he just kind of glides into those soft spots, and he presents an opening for a throwing lane for his quarterback. He's a quarterback's best friend that way. And I think that's a very nuanced skill that you look for in wide receivers. But when you see it in a tight end and you see this gigantic target that can find a soft spot in the zone, that really does help your offense. You and I love Jordan Addison coming out. you know.
Mhm.
And I always thought Jordan Addison's best attribute was that he was just so intelligent as a route runner. He always found the soft spots in the zone. Like no matter what route he ran, no matter what defense people played against him, he was instinctively always open somehow. He found his way to get open and present this great target for Caleb Williams last year and for Kenny Pickett the year before that. Obviously, this guy's not Jordan Addison, but as a tight end, he's pretty damn good at finding those soft spots in zone and presenting that target. So that's my favorite part of his game. Um, like you mentioned, he doesn't break a lot of tackles, but he's so damn big that even if he just falls forward, he's getting like 2 to 3 extra yards, and he does that like pretty routinely. Like he takes a hit, and as soon as he gets hit, and he knows he's going down, like this big sequoia that's about to fall, he just kind of leans forward, protects the ball, and then just like falls forward for a few yards. So those yards add up, and they're useful. Um, Not a very good blocker. I think, like you said, he fires in the blocks in open space. He's all upper body though. When you watch him, like he's not a good anchored blocker. He just tries to fire his chest into people,
Yeah.
which is okay. And in college, in the NFL, somebody's gonna just knock him on his ass and just take him out if he does that. So I don't expect him to be a great blocker at the NFL level. I think he's just a big, tall target that can run routes well and get open in zone and be a useful tight end that way. Um, how does he project in the NFL? It's a little hard for me to project him. Um, he really has the body type of a Darren Waller, but he doesn't have that kind of athletic ability or speed. Um, but I do think he's sort of I think he's a good tight end too. I think that's where I see him also, like as a not a great blocker, but a good route runner, big target, not somebody you can keep on the field constantly, in my opinion, because I don't think he's a reliable enough blocker.
Mhm.
But in passing downs where you want him to run a route and be a target for your quarterback, I think he does that very well. So
Yeah, and I agree with you, and, he has the body to become a blocker. He just needs to start driving those legs throughout the block. Right now, it's almost like when you do the sled drill. He takes the sled and he pushes it up, but he doesn't push through and start. He doesn't do the driving the sled down the field. He just does the first
doesn't have
part.
the doesn't have the best technique, man.
Yeah. But he's good, man. I do like him. I think ultimately though, I think he's not gonna come out this year if I had to guess with that ankle injury. He still has 2 years of eligibility left with he was a total redshirt his freshman year, and then there's the COVID year. So I think with that ankle injury, I'd imagine that he would stay. I could be wrong, but I would be interested if he does come out, but that's just my guess with him. Uh, but yeah, that's all I have on him. Definitely a
So
fan.
so let's recap our top five. Brock Bowers from Georgia, number one. Jatavian Sanders from Texas, number two. Cade Stover from Ohio State, number three. Number four was Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, and number five was Luke Lachey from Iowa. This gets us to our usual my guys. We have two my guys. Why don't you go and introduce your my guy first, and then we'll do mine, and that'll be our tight end episode.
Sure. So I'm actually really excited about my guy. So I was trying to do some looks and something that I've been trying to do a little bit more because we're so far into the season. I've been trying to um, push away from the viewing into the upcoming season, be like, who is these guys that we weren't talking about going into the season that have showed up? And this guy that I have is Dallin Holker. He's out of Colorado State. Shout out Trey McBride. 6'5", 235 pounds. Uh, he is a really interesting player, man. He actually was a transfer from BYU. Uh, and he played his first couple years there. He he's junior year, he had an ankle injury versus USC. So, and that was in their third game. So there really wasn't any stats last year for him. So he was kind of off everybody's radar going into the season, despite, you know, him being a really good high school football player in Utah. That one of the reasons he went to BYU. His senior year, he had 97 receptions for 1,766 yards and 22 touchdowns. That was the
Wow.
second most yards in state history, and he missed 2 games that year. So he was a beast there, and he got playing time right away as a freshman at BYU. But this year is the year he's really starting to put it all together. For anybody who's watching or listening who's a college football fan, I'm sure a lot of you tuned into the Colorado State game. And if you did, he was that tight end number 5 who had that long catch and run in the fourth quarter to put Colorado State up by a second score. He went off in that game for over 100 yards, and so far for 6 games this year, so and about half the season, he's had 497 yards, on track for almost 1,000 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns, on track for double digits receiving touchdowns, 65.2 PFF grade, but a 70.2 receiving grade and a 41.5 run blocking grade. So not the best run blocking numbers, but I'll throw something else out here that we haven't done for other guys just because I noticed it was very high and it was consistently high at BYU even. He has a 73.8 pass blocking grade. So
Wow.
although he's not a very good run blocker, he's a guy who when they keep him in, he does help out in the pass blocking. He also, so far this season, has 251 yards after the catch. So he's on track to have more yards after the catch than Brock Bowers had last year. 9 missed tackles forced. He's on track to have like the same amount of missed tackle force Brock Bowers had, and he has a 70% catch rate. So obviously, Mountain West, not the same level of competition that there are in some of these other conferences, but he is really having a good year, man. And when I watch him, he is just a incredible athlete. I mean, a guy who was a basketball player and a track runner in high school. Uh, Although he's not the biggest guy, he can use his athleticism to win after the catch, and he's able to break tackles. He's a a good hands catcher. Overall, I tried to get more tape on him than I was able to, but from what I was able to find, he was very good. I got a lot from the Colorado State game. That was the one I was able to watch the most of him from. But he is a really interesting player who's on nobody's radar right now. He's unranked by PFF. He wasn't mentioned at all in Brugler's list, and he mentions a lot of like seniors and underclassmen. And he's nowhere to be found. And I think this guy's a guy who could rise up draft boards. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, look, those numbers are going to pop off the page when we get to draft time. So just keep an eye on Dallin Holker, and it's a pretty great name. So I mean,
He's a tight end name. Yeah.
yeah, Hulk.
Wow.
But yeah, that's all I have, man.
I'm gonna watch him more now. Gotta watch
Yeah,
him more.
yeah, for sure. You're not gonna
So,
get the tape, so you got to turn on it. Colorado State football.
whenever that's actually on, but
Yeah, I mean,
if
it'll
it
be on
ever
like
is,
10 o'clock at night.
yeah, that's true.
Perfect time to watch it.
Exactly. All right. So then that'll bring me to my guy. That's our final my guy. And he is like the opposite of your my guy. So this
Yeah.
guy is a well-known my guy from the tight end world, but nowhere near as much of like an exciting like hidden athletic gem. But my
Size
guy is, I'm sorry?
similar size though.
Similar size, but a very different profile. So my
Yeah.
guy is Bryson Nesbit from University of North Carolina, 6'5", 235 pounds, four-star recruit, third-year player. If the name sounds familiar, his father was an NFL player. Jamar Nesbit was an offensive guard who played on the Panthers, I think on the Jaguars, and he won a Super Bowl with the Saints. Um, And so he comes from, NFL bloodlines, which we always like to point out, and it's got some value, and I'm always intrigued by that. He had a 78 PFF overall grade, which is really good in 2022. 78 receiving grade, 73.7 run blocking grade. He had 152 yards of yak. He had 3 missed tackles for us, which wasn't great. 58.3% contested catch rate, which is decent. Maybe not as good as you want for a tight end, but pretty good. Um, there are things to like about his game, though. I mean, he's a move tight end. He's a modern day move tight end. He's a guy that is great in vertical routes and getting separation and being a target on the run for your quarterback. He is one of the favorite targets for Drake May. Drake May loves finding this guy in space, and I don't know if his production is related to Drake May or if he's just a good player. Um, there are, like you said, I think some of your concerns that he doesn't get a lot of yak, he doesn't break a lot of tackles, might point to this being more of like a Drake May merchant kind of a scenario, but nevertheless, he is productive. He is a good field stretcher through the seams as a route runner. He works really well on comeback routes, presents a big target again, uses his hands well, as a good hands catcher. And what's good about him is he's a mismatch. He's a mismatch for linebackers because he's too fast for them, and he's a mismatch for cornerbacks because he's too big for them. So he's kind of a tricky player to cover, and he presents that. If nothing else, he presents that conundrum for defenses on the field, or who's covering this guy. If you put a linebacker on him, he's going to burn him. If you put a cornerback on him, he's going to just be too big for them. He might outmuscle them. So, do you double team him? Do you dedicate a safety to him? He has that value to an offense where he may not be the game wrecker in the NFL. He does have the ability to be a problem in terms of defensive mismatches, and that's where his value is. Not, I don't think he's an inline blocker at all. I don't think he works well in line. I don't think he fires out of his 3-point stance or anything very well. He's basically a receiver playing tight end. From the Evan Ingram mold, the Darren Waller molds, but not as athletic as those guys. But guys like this they're becoming more and more prevalent in the NFL. Receiver tight ends, move tight ends. So I think somebody to watch. I do think I'm going to check where he was on the big board. I want to say he's somewhere similar to the last couple of guys. He's ranked 185 on Trevor Sycamores' big board, so we're talking about 6th round territory. But highly productive, somebody worth paying attention to, especially if his quarterback happens to land on the Giants. Let's just put it that way. Maybe that's why I like him, because if his quarterback ends up on the Giants next year, maybe you want to grab this guy in the 6th or 7th round and have him have a nice little safety valve that he's used to. But my guy is Bryson Nesbit out of UNC. Do you have any thoughts on him, or any final thoughts on our tight end room here?
Yeah. No, I think you nailed it with him. It was ironic a little bit that he was the son of an NFL lineman, and his weakness is blocking. But I do like Nesbitt. He's a good target for May. But yeah, guys, I mean that's the tight end episode. Definitely not the tight ends that we saw in last year's draft class. That's
Yeah,
for sure. But there's some interesting names out there.
yeah.
Luckily for us, it's not a huge need for us, so a down tight end class doesn't kill us.
And that need may not kick into these last few guys we just kind of discussed, the day 3, late day 3 kind of area. That's kind of where, if the Giants are looking at tight end, and they may be to add depth to the room, it's going to be guys like this. It's going to be guys like Nesbitt. It's going to be guys like Holker. It's going to be guys like, if Lachey's out there, him. Um, So we'll see what the Giants do, but that's the group. Not as exciting as some of the others, but solid, but obviously a little top heavy. Um, that's kind of an episode right there. I think we can probably wrap it up, except for, as per usual, our episodes get progressively longer and longer for some reason. But the good news is Monty always attaches the timestamps to each player.
Yep.
So if you want to go look at it that way, feel free to. Don't feel compelled to run through the whole hour and whatever we have. But we're going to give you some games for week 8 of college football coming up. There's some good ones here. The headliner game, very clearly, is a 12 o'clock game on Saturday. Penn State at Ohio State. This is an
Yeah.
absolute battle of the Titans kind of game. Penn State's having a fantastic year. They have one of the best young quarterbacks in college football, in Cade Stover, as a redshirt freshman. Very, very likely to be in competition for number one overall pick in 2025. Um, and then you've got Ohio State. And obviously Penn State, we've mentioned some of their players already, right? Obviously Chop Robinson, the Water Boy. Um, they have other players like Kalen King, a cornerback who we'll eventually get to. They have some good players on offense overall, and Ohio State is just as per usual loaded with talent. Not the best quarterback room, but they still have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Mecca Ibuka and Travion Henderson and a bunch of other playmakers on that defense. So that's the big one to watch, I think. Do you have any games that you want to tell our viewers about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good week of college football. And failed to mention we got Cade Stover in that game, who we just talked about in Ohio State. So
Yeah,
we got him, but yeah, I one game I have my eye on for people who are interested in quarterbacks. We have Oregon versus Washington State.
yeah.
Bo Nix is a guy who I think there's a good shot he is available day two if we don't, go quarterback round one, depending on how it shakes out. And then I know a lot of people are a fan of Cam Ward. He's had a down couple games, and Oregon's a really good defense. So that's a big opportunity for Cam Ward to kind of like step back up and show who he can be. Um, Another one I wanted to point out was Florida State versus Duke. Duke has had statistically one of the best defenses in the country this year, and they're going up against Florida State, who's statistically been one of the best offenses in this country. So I think that's you don't think of Duke as a football school necessarily, but their defense has been legit this year. So really
We
some
should
really good
we
prospects in this.
we should probably mention their quarterback.
Should
Both the
we?
quarterbacks. I mean, we might as well mention his name. But there are two quarterbacks that are probably day two quarterbacks in that matchup, and I think that's worth
Yes, there
mentioning.
are.
So, Duke's Riley Leonard, who is basically just Daniel
Yeah,
Jones.
Daniel
Just
Jones
you'll
2.0.
hear he's the newer version of Daniel
Yeah.
Jones. His mentor is Daniel Jones, but let's just leave it at that. They do have Graham Barton, the offensive lineman, the tackle that we talked about. But
Mhm.
Florida State obviously has lots of players. But we didn't talk about him yet. But Jordan Travis of Florida State is a day two player who's on the rise, and he's been in
Yep.
college since I was in college. So there's that. But he is thought of as a day two prospect. So they're both in that as well. There's the usual Michigan State grudge match. It hasn't been much of a grudge match for a while. Michigan has been slaughtering them for a bit. But what's fun about this one is that Michigan State threatened to not play the game because they accused Michigan of stealing signs and whatnot. And the NCAA is investigating Michigan, which is always fun. Sorry, Shane. Only
Yeah.
fun. Only fun for us because in case something happens, Sharon Moore, their co-offensive coordinator and offensive line guru and run game coordinator, may become available for a team in the NFL that may want to hire somebody of that
He's a
ilk. I don't
giant.
know. Like he's a giant. Anyway, that's it. Sorry, Shane, but if what's better, if you can't keep him in Michigan, you might as well have him as a giant, right? Uh, but that's kind of an episode. Do you have any other parting thoughts for our friends watching or listening at
Uh,
home?
One last game I wanted to mention. Caleb Williams had a really tough game this last
Yeah,
week, and he's had a couple tough weeks in a row. I mean, Arizona wasn't that bad, but he had a really tough week versus Notre Dame, and he's facing Utah this week, team that he is lost twice in a row to. So,
yeah,
following a tough game, Utah has a good defense. I think this is a game to keep Drake May from potentially passing him, because Drake May is a great quarterback prospect. I know Caleb Williams is looked at as a clear number one, but if he has another bad game, I think Drake May's discussions he's going to get louder and louder. So
yeah.
that's another one to keep an eye
Yeah,
on.
we'll go into that in depth when we do our quarterback reviews, but that's a good
Mhm.
game, and I think USC in general struggles against Utah, so
Yep.
it's going to be a game where I don't know what the outcome of the game is going to be. Utah's probably I haven't looked at the line. I'm assuming it's going to be almost a pick 'em type game, but I think Utah is the better team, and the question is, can Caleb Williams be the difference maker? So it's going to be an interesting matchup.
Yep.
All right,
That's all I
man.
have.
Long episode, our longest episode yet. We're coming up on 2 hours. So sorry, folks. Use the timestamps if you don't want to watch the whole damn thing. But
Everybody's probably like, telling me about the timestamps now. God damn it.
don't be scared away by the number when you see it. Anyway, that's episode 8 of He's a Giant. We thank you guys for listening, for tuning in. Again, you can catch me on Twitter /X at Queens_guy. You can catch Monty at Monte Cristo at MONTECRI5DO, or you can just find us at He's a Giant Pod. Please leave us reviews, leave us 5 stars, reach out to us on Twitter or /X. Give us your thoughts. We love all the support you guys have been giving us. Next week is episode 9, and I believe we're hitting safeties. So we haven't really decided. It'll be either safeties or cornerbacks, but I'm kind of leaning safety. What are you thinking?
We already said it, so let's go safeties.
I decided safeties. And remember, folks, don't let them gaslight you. Gaslighting isn't real. You're just crazy. I'll leave it at that. You guys have a good night. Take care.
See you next time, guys.
See you next time.